Every piece of media has its fair share of wacky theories, and Fallout is no different. Today we are going to take a look at 3 extremely interesting Fallout theories. Now, I did not come up with the original ideas of any of these theories, I have just given my take on each one. These theories are just for fun and should not be taken as if I am seriously arguing for each one. They all have holes in them, so don't take this video too seriously. Please leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you do enjoy this video. So the first theory we are going to discuss is the Synth Theory. In the Fallout universe, there are beings known as synths. We briefly are introduced to these entities in Fallout 3, but we uncover the full picture in Fallout 4. The synth is an artificial life form created by the Institute, an underground secret society dedicated to advancing humanity. 3 types of synth thus far exist. The Generation 1 synths, which are simplistic robotic skeletons that are fairly feeble, but very useful as machines that listen to every given command. The Generation 2 synths are an improvement on their predecessors with human-like faces and bodies, although they are still mere robots with no thoughts or feelings, and they simply respond to commands. There are 2 synths that are more advanced than this that are still technically Generation 2 synths, which are Nick Valentine and Dima, who were prototypes created by the Institute as a prelude to their next generation of synthetic beings, the Gen 3 synths. The Gen 3 synths are an enormous leap in progress. These synthetic beings are indistinguishable to human beings, as told to us in the game. There is no medical test that can be performed to identify a synth whilst they're still alive. They must be killed, and only then can their synth component be revealed. These beings are free-thinking, feeling creatures that are human in every possible way. Their origins may be artificial, but they are demonstrated to be as human as you or I. The only major difference between man and synth is the computational elements present in their brains. These synth components within their brains permit the manipulation of their memories. Entirely new backstories can be crafted and inserted into synth brains, allowing the complete alteration of a personality. Now, after explaining all of this, what if I posited a question to you? What if your player character in Fallout 4 is a synth? Now, you would probably respond that this suggestion is ridiculous. We, out of all people in the Fallout universe, couldn't be a synth. Our player was born centuries before the game takes place in the pre-war era. How could we possibly be a synth? But what if I said that your extraordinary origin is precisely the evidence that indicates that your player character is a synthetic being? When in the Far Harbor DLC, we can speak to the synth Dima, who asks our player character this very question: do we think we are a synth? We scoff at this nonsense and respond no, to which he asks us what is our earliest memory. Our character can only answer the question in one way: the day the bombs fell. That day over 2 centuries ago is our first memory ever. Dima seems perplexed at this and presses us further, as it is very strange that we are unable to remember even a fleeting moment from our childhood or adolescence, meeting our wife, or even having our son Sean. The earliest memory our brains can possibly recall is one when we were a fully grown adult. Let's go back to that day over 2 centuries ago, October 23rd, 2077. Our first ever memory that we can remember. We appear standing in front of a mirror and begin our routine walking around the house. But really looking closer at what's going on, it all seems rather suspicious, doesn't it? I mean, we can interact with everything in our home, but who walks up to some Salisbury steak and announces,
"Saddle up Salisbury steak, graded A+.
Or says to some sugar bombs,
100% daily value of sugar."
These things that we retort seem like pre-written ad lines that were heard in old commercials back in the day that perhaps the creators of this memory have implemented into our backstory. The television discussing the daily news seems rather interesting, as we are provided with just enough context to understand the political situation of the world before it ended. We are placed into a world that seems completely hollow and devoid of life. There is no one walking the streets, there is nothing happening outside, apart from one man walking to the door. We retort slogans and very generic words at every item in our home, whilst being fed the news to inform us of the goings-on of the world. Doesn't this seem as if someone has crafted pre-war society, and specifically the day the bombs fell, based on historical records that they have found? The only other thing our character can remember about themselves is that if we choose Nate, we acknowledge that we once a soldier and have spent time in the military. Now of course you could say if we were a synth made by the Institute, well the Institute are so advanced they could program all sorts of memories into synths. Why not give us a properly fleshed out backstory and not just one fleeting memory of the end of the world and the knowledge that we were a soldier? Why not make you remember everything? And I would answer this as I don't think the Institute can. The world the Institute live in is one separated from the pre-war era by over 2 centuries. There are only a handful of people that can remember the pre-war world, such as very old ghouls, those given experimental serums, and others. But none of these people exist within the Institute. Father himself said in his terminals that the Institute has no interest in prolonging lifespan, which is something they dabbled with when experimenting on Kellogg, who managed to make it to over 100. This means that everyone in the Institute has no knowledge of the pre-war era besides what records can be salvaged, which aren't many. It's the equivalent as if us in the modern day attempted to reconstruct the life of one singular person born in the early 1800s, and add to that an apocalyptic event that erased so many records that made the situation even harder. The Institute, when accessing Vault 111, would probably gather the intel that our character was a soldier and that's why we were invited to the vault, and it may have shown their address, but it would be clear our character was a native of Sanctuary. And if our character was female, the vault logs would probably show that her occupation was being a lawyer. So to add to this thought, all we understand in our first memory is that we are a soldier or a lawyer, and we live in Sanctuary, and we have been invited to Vault 111. That's it. We have no other background knowledge about ourselves at all. Isn't that suspicious how vague our backstory is, and how the intel we have about ourselves is identical to what the Institute could gather from Vault records? Moving back to our first memory, we eventually receive a knock at the door, and we find the Vault Tech rep that just so happens to reach us and inform us we are approved for the Vault on the very day itself that the bombs fall. That seems rather lucky, doesn't it? Literally 5 minutes later, we realise that the world is ending and we leap on over to Vault 111 and manage to get on the platform quite literally just as the bombs fall, and we descend into the ground without a singular second to spare. Once again, incredible luck. So in the span of 5 minutes we have been permitted to enter the vault, the world has ended, and we just miss the shockwave of the nuclear blast by a second. Very believable. Once in the vault, we see the Vault-Tec employees, who seem completely unfazed about what has just happened, which is rather suspicious to say the least. Then we are taken along and frozen in our pod, we watch Kellogg and the Institute kill our spouse and steal our son, we get refrozen, and we awaken in 2287. Doesn't all of this just seem so strange? I think what we have just experienced is a crafted memory that has the perfect amount of detail to inform our brain of what has transpired. But it clearly is a manufactured experience due to the severe lack of humanity in every scene we find ourselves in, ad slogans being regurgitated out of our mouths about popular brands, the news being blared into our ears, finding out we have been approved for the vault, the world ending, and plus the fact that we missed the shockwave by a mere second. No way any of that was reality. No natural human would say the things we say or experience such remarkable and frankly impossible luck on the day of the end of the world. Now, all of this is just speculation so far. We don't particularly have any hard evidence that indicates that we are some sort of synth experiment, or do we? In the Institute, we learn that Father, the leader, is our son, and he was taken from the vault for his uncontaminated genetic material to kickstart the Generation 3 synth program. We were named the backup by Kellogg because we were related to the primary subject, Sean, and we would be used in case anything happened to Sean or something went wrong with his DNA. Our release from the Institute, as told to us by Sean, was entirely because of him. In his old age, he had decided to free us from our ice prison. What I find odd about this is that we were a prime genetic subject and a relic from the 21st century that the Institute would certainly have leapt at. We would absolutely not have been permitted to be let out of the cryopods and left to roam the wastes because our possible contribution to science would be certainly of value to the Institute. They could have used our genes, sure, but more than that, what if we had valuable military or other possible knowledge that had been lost to time? Additionally, what child who has literally zero living biological relatives would let their only possible connection to their past go into a terrifying and dangerous wasteland? We could have told Sean about his origins, his family, our lives together before the bombs, but no. Sean simply let us, his father and only blood relation, potentially die a horrific death in a violent, disgusting land devoid of structure and society. Reading Sean's terminals, we can uncover more about his opinion of us. Sean begins by discussing the sightings that have been reported of us, and asks the question, will all of this have been for nothing? What exactly has Sean done? Let us out of a cryopod? It's hardly a difficult task. Sean continues in stating that he will have learned valuable things about himself and his past. This is rather intriguing considering that he doesn't ever actually plan on interacting with us, and is simply watching us. Sean then specifically states that he must not get emotionally involved, which is pretty strange considering that we are his father and that he must merely observe. Why would a son need to observe his parent? What is this for? What does this accomplish? And why would all of this be for nothing? If we are truly a human being, then the answer is nothing. But if we are maybe something more valuable and interesting to the Institute, then this adds up perfectly. Sean wanted to test the capabilities of a synth modelled on the personality of his biological father or mother, and see how they would fare in an unfamiliar and hostile world. All of this does not read as if a son who has no family has freed his one singular relative from cryostasis, but of a scientist observing his own creation to attempt to learn about a hidden history. I believe we see here Sean confirming that our character is nothing but another Institute experiment, one that is designed to mimic his parent so Sean can attempt to understand who we were and observe our decision making. We are completely disposable to Sean because we are not real. We are a synthetic being that Sean believes is just a machine, but one that might be able to answer his deepest questions about his origins. Now this begs the question of, if we are a synth, what happened to the real us? I think that once Kellogg took Sean and they used his DNA to successfully create the Generation 3 synths, then our life support was turned off. We were not needed anymore, and thus we were left to die. Now there is other evidence in the game that can be used to support this theory, such as the fact that the sole survivor can use VATS before they ever acquire a Pip-Boy, and thus this must prove that we are a computational being. However, this is simply game design. This theory certainly is not concrete, but the evidence discussed here is quite compelling in my opinion, but let me know your thoughts. Now the next theory we are going to discuss is the theory about the connection between the Elder Scrolls universe and the Fallout universe. The main evidence of this comes from the Brotherhood of Steel airship that harbours an interesting plant. This plant in question is identical to the known root of the Elder Scrolls universe, thus establishing a potential connection between the two. Now if you are knowledgeable on the Elder Scrolls and Fallout lore, you probably would immediately look at this theory with contempt, as it is just ridiculous. The Elder Scrolls universe is one of magic, of gods, fantastical beings such as orcs, elves and the like, none of which appear in the Fallout universe. The Elder Scrolls is set within a time period akin to that of the Middle Ages in Europe, where guns are absent and swords, armour and shields reign supreme. How could such a medieval world, rife with these fantastical elements, exist in the same universe as Fallout, a universe that states the timeline divergence between our own world and the Fallout world did not occur until the mid-20th century, after World War II? Don't you think somewhere we would learn of the magical Middle Ages in the Fallout world? Well, I posit to you the theory that the two universes are in fact connected, but not in the way you may think. The Elder Scrolls may appear to be set in what we would deem the past, but what if it is in fact set in the far, far future? The Fallout world was identical to our own prior to the 20th century. Technically speaking, aliens did exist in the Fallout world and have interacted with humans since the colonial period in the United States, as told to us by their interrogation audio tapes, but nothing major affected the Fallout world until it diverged from our own in the 1950s and 60s. Here is when the Fallout universe went on a completely different trajectory to our own. The culture of the 1950s never waned from the United States, and technology progressed extremely differently. The nuclear apocalypse that began in 2077 completely altered the Earth's landscape and created beings that were completely alien to humanity prior to the Great War. Ghouls, super mutants, huge insects, deathclaws, and many more beings never existed in the Fallout universe before the Great War. They all came into being once radiation and the FEV massively mutated so many creatures across the globe. This evolution and alteration witnessed in so many different species was rapid. Evolution is incredibly slow normally. However, with these two factors, the evolution of life on Earth was no longer limited to the painstakingly long process it once was bound to. Now creatures could transform in a matter of years. What if the Elder Scrolls universe is set thousands or perhaps hundreds of thousands, maybe even millions of years in the far future? This could explain the existence of so many differing beings and races in the Elder Scrolls universe. Rapid evolution from the ancient FEV and radiation would completely alter the trajectory of many lifeforms on Earth, creating what we would deem seemingly alien beings. In our own reality, incredibly strange lifeforms have existed just in the past few 100,000 years alongside anatomically modern humans, and these include giant ground sloths and even Gigantopithecus. What we would view as these fantasy creatures like elves and orcs are really just mutated humans who have adapted to differing regions on Earth. The powers that each race have, which is seemingly magical, could simply be evolutionary abilities that are masquerading as mystical ones. Shooting fire from one's hand to a person who does not understand this would simply be deemed magic. But perhaps evolution has crafted the ability to harness fire in the palms of certain beings as a defense mechanism. The huge disparity in technology is another significant factor that must be discussed. From the golden age of the 20th century in the Fallout universe to the dystopia that is post-war America, the technology of the societies in the wasteland has declined massively. Certain factions like the Institute were able to rise up and create technology that exceeded even the pre-war world. However, most of the wasteland was technologically barren compared to what it once was before the Great War. This is mirrored in reality. The Antikythera mechanism that was discovered to accurately track the movement of planets was deemed the world's first computational device, and it would be millennia before anything even remotely as advanced as that was created again. Technologies are lost consistently as societies crumble and knowledge fades. This could easily have transpired within the Elder Scrolls universe, and major technologies such as firearms or even electricity were lost as fuel shortages arose, or they simply were deemed unneeded and thus forgotten about. Additionally, the Dwemer in the Elder Scrolls universe are a group who harness the power of technology, which is far more advanced than anyone else in the Elder Scrolls universe has ever made. Meaning, in the established lore of the Elder Scrolls world, there was a faction that was far technologically superior than everyone else, and who eventually disappeared, and their knowledge and secrets were lost to time. Perhaps they are a metaphor for the much more ancient human beings that once existed in the time of Fallout. The huge pre-war and post-war cities that existed across the globe would be consumed by nature and eventually completely flattened and overtaken by the Earth itself, completely removing any trace of a pre-war society. Speaking of the alteration of the landscape, the continents witnessed in the Elder Scrolls universe are completely different to those on Earth. This can be explained by continental drift, which occurs constantly. It takes an extremely long time, but the continents of the Earth are persistently on the move. Once all land was fused into the supercontinent called Pangaea, but now we have land that is quite spread out. The British Isles and Japan were fused to mainland Europe and Asia in the last few thousand years. The face of the Earth changes all the time, and in this theory this explains this massive difference. If we look above us in the Elder Scrolls universe, we see not one, but two moons orbiting the planet. Of course, as we all might be aware of, Earth only has one singular moon. However, this is very easily explained as rogue objects darting through space are frequently picked up by the gravitational pull of much larger objects, and thus they become entrapped in their orbit. Earth in reality has had small second moons be locked in its orbit for some time, but they have been extremely small and not visible with the naked eye. If a large enough object were to come close enough to Earth and become entrapped in the Earth's orbit, then our planet could gain a second moon. And if the Elder Scrolls universe takes place thousands or possibly millions of years in the future, then an event such as this could have occurred during the huge time jump between the world of Fallout and the Elder Scrolls. The more theological aspects of the Elder Scrolls universe are potentially more difficult to unravel. The Elder Scrolls is a universe that has active deities, as they are described, who are extremely powerful and magical. Of course, the Fallout universe doesn't have this, and this is a pretty big difference. However, these beings may not be as magical and powerful as they may seem, as they potentially could be those who clung to their advanced technology when the rest of the world declined and used this tech to appear as gods and beings of extreme power. What is deemed magic to someone is technology to another. Show a medieval peasant Candy Crush on your phone and he will completely be amazed and baffled at how this trickery works. To him it is completely alien. He would have no idea about electricity or computer science or anything of the sort, and to him it is, for all intents and purposes, magic. To you, however, it is just technology. You understand it, you are used to it. And this could be the same sort of logic that the gods, in quotation marks, of the Elder Scrolls universe use. They could simply be regular people who have used technology to ascend to a higher plane of existence that mortal people are completely unaware of. Now, this theory is pretty spotty when it comes to evidence, and also it has some major holes, such as the fact that the sun in the Elder Scrolls universe is not a star, but a huge gaping hole leading to another dimensional plane that emits light, and the stars in the night sky are also this too. You could argue, well, how do they know? The Elder Scrolls universe doesn't exactly have a space program now, does it? Additionally, the planets that surround Earth, or Nirn as it is called in the Elder Scrolls universe, are in fact the physical representations of the Aedra gods who are trapped in the plane of Mundus, and not in fact the regular planets that we know in our own solar system. You could then perhaps argue that in the Fallout universe, a band of people left the Earth in search for a habitable planet and stumbled upon Nirn and settled there, and over the course of millions of years they forgot about their spacefaring roots and thought they were indigenous to the planet, and created many mystical elements surrounding their origin. But remember, these theories are just a bit of fun, don't take them too seriously. Okay, so the last theory that we are going to discuss is a theory about the Morton Residence in Nuka World. This theory is a little bit half-baked compared to the last two, so I would greatly appreciate any input or further evidence that anyone may have that they could add to this interesting idea. The Morton Residence, located in Nuka World, is a hotspot for peculiar activity pertaining to power armor, and this place opens up a lot of questions about what could have happened here. If we head on over to the northeast of Nuka World, the Morton Residence house will be found standing in the middle of nowhere. After getting closer, we can find an entrance via this tunnel into the basement of the building. Here we find a skeleton, presumably the Mr. Morton, and some radroaches skulking around. If we climb the stairs and enter into the garage of the building, we find the most mysterious power armor frame in all of Fallout 4. Provided your character isn't a super low or super high level, what will spawn here should be a mishmash of some of the most rare and unique power armor in Fallout 4. Here you can find Brotherhood of Steel power armor at varying ranks, including very high ones such as Knight Captain, Knight Sergeant, Paladin, Sentinel, and even Elder. This is incredibly strange, as these power armors are supposed to be only obtainable from completing certain quests in the Brotherhood or by turning on the faction and slaughtering the members of the Brotherhood who wear these respective power armors. You may also find a jetpack affixed to the power armor or even military painted power armor, which does not spawn anywhere naturally in the game apart from this location. This begs the question, why does the Morton Residence possess this incredibly rare and unique Brotherhood of Steel power armor? Was Mr. Morton once a member of the faction, and here lies his Brotherhood power armor rusting away after his death, which evidently was quite some time ago, by the state of his corpse? But hypothetically, if Mr. Morton was indeed a Brotherhood member, he should have a full set of power armor that is equal in its rank. No other member of the Brotherhood possesses power armor that mixes and matches differing ranks. This would suggest that Mr. Morton was either not in fact a member of the Brotherhood, and perhaps someone who either stole, bought, or happened upon a menagerie of Brotherhood of Steel power armor, and he took it for himself back to his house, or perhaps Mr. Morton was not alone. Perhaps he and other members of the Brotherhood made their way to the far corners of Nuka World and simply merged their remaining power armor onto this singular frame. This then conjures up further questions. How and why did this armor get to Nuka World? The Brotherhood are a faction that seems to be needlessly inserted into every Fallout game, but in the Nuka World DLC, the Brotherhood do not appear at all. The only real person of the Brotherhood that makes an appearance in the Nuka World DLC is the Rogue Knight, who challenges you in the Cola Cars arena after completing the gauntlet. If you battle them and kill them, you will receive the legendary Gatling laser Eternus from them. Could this be that another Brotherhood member or a pack of members made their way to Nuka World and set up residence at the Morton Residence? Maybe that is exactly what the Rogue Knight was doing. We assume they were just a random Brotherhood member that stumbled into the gauntlet, but what if they had a purpose to make contact with their fellow brothers who were hiding in the far reaches of Nuka World? I mean, logically, why would a rogue member of the Brotherhood end up travelling along into Nuka World? You would think random unsuspecting wastelanders or idiotic super mutants would fall for this trap, but not a decorated member of the Brotherhood who has acquired power armor and who wields a Gatling laser. Perhaps this member of the Brotherhood was one of many who have traversed over to Nuka World to live on the far side of the park. Clearly this isn't a sanctioned operation, or else the whole might of the Brotherhood would descend on Nuka World, or at least a squadron would be dropped in via Vertibird. This seems more as if Brotherhood members have heard rumours of a place in Nuka World, and these rumours have managed to convince some to abandon the faction and turn their backs on them just to get to Nuka World. but what could possibly be alluring all of these Brotherhood members to leave the protection of such a mighty faction and run away to the far reaches of a theme park? Interestingly enough, we can also find other deserters from other military factions in Nuka World. The Gunners have a notable presence at the Bradburton Interchange, which is nearby to Morton Residence, and there are sporadic instances of Gunners dotted throughout Nuka World, both dead and alive. In the Grantchester Mystery Mansion, the gunner Zachariah resides there after deserting the Gunners at the Mass Pike Interchange. I suspect that there may be a recruitment drive with some serious cash behind it that perhaps an unknown faction is offering. Maybe a secret military organisation is calling upon those with the skills necessary to join their ranks and offering a great deal which has made so many BOS and Gunner members flock to Nuka World in search of their fortune. What if a force of the most skilled and technologically advanced people was being built in the far reaches of Nuka World, shielded by the raider factions in the main part of the Nuka World Park? This is a really interesting theory that I would love some input on, as it has a lot of potential to expand into something really special. I'm not too sure if anyone else has talked about this in the way I have just discussed. The knowledge that Morton Residence spawns rare power armor is certainly known and discussed on the Fallout wiki, but I don't know if anyone's theorized along the same lines as myself. I think that a secret group may be forming in the far reaches of Nuka World, and they're recruiting the best of the best to create an unstoppable army. So that was 3 theories that are rather interesting about Fallout 4. If you did enjoy this video, please make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. If you disagree with any of the points said in this video, if you have any evidence to argue against, then do let me know. Again, this is just an interesting video. It is not meant to be taken too seriously. Thank you again for watching the video, and I will see you all in the next one in a bit.